Forty20 Newscast.
Good afternoon, it's Tom Alderson here. I'm with Tom Kurtz. We're the co-founders of Forty20 News, and we're back again to bring you another Forty20 Newscast on Friday, the 3rd of July, to talk about all the major news stories breaking this week in the world of rugby league. We'll get straight into it with the news breaking earlier this week that the Magic Weekend has unfortunately been cancelled until next year. It's now penciled in for the weekend of the 29th and 30th of May, but it will still be at St James's Park. Tom, your initial thoughts on this? Do you think it was the correct decision to cancel it altogether? I know there was some faint hopes that it may be rescheduled for later in the year.
Yeah, there were some faint hopes. And I know when Super League initially announced its postponement that it was with a view to it being scheduled or rescheduled for later in the season. Obviously, from a commercial perspective, it's one of the marquee events in the UK and certainly a big earner for Super League. And obviously, a lot of anticipation this year with it returning to Newcastle. If we're being honest, I think as the situation developed over the last month, it became more and more likely that we wouldn't see that event go ahead this year. I think the consolation we can draw from it, and we have to pay credit to Super League for this, is that they've already penciled in dates for next year. They've stopped short of confirming those dates. I think it's subject to a few I's being dotted and T's being crossed, but it looks very likely that we will be in Newcastle next year, and it looks likely that we have dates in the diary. And I know I've seen some supporters already going ahead and booking hotels, which is fantastic to see. The interesting thing about it now being next year in Newcastle is that it's World Cup year. We have the opening ceremony of next year's tournament in Newcastle. So what an opportunity for the tournament organisers to use that as a platform to market the tournament, to engage with the people of Newcastle. They've had Magic Weekend before, they've had Rugby League before, but so soon close to the start of the tournament to have that platform to promote is brilliant. And then the other element, which has been valid for a few years, they're doing some great work up at Newcastle Thunder in developing the sport. And I know how pleased the leadership up there was that Magic was returning to Newcastle. So I'll be really glad to see them make the most of the opportunities next year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Although it's sad to see, and I agree, there was an air of inevitability about it, wasn't there? And we'd already seen the Ashes series against Australia being cancelled for this year, and I don't think anybody's too surprised, unfortunately, to see the Magic Weekend get squeezed out as well, as the focus predominantly seems to be on trying to get as many Super League games going as possible, which is obviously really important to the clubs and the competition. But like you say, a really good opportunity to sort of really expose the city of Newcastle to the World Cup, on a perhaps earlier occasion than they may have been able to do so. So, certainly things to build on there. Moving on, one of the big talking points out of this week, of course, is the news that John Bateman will leave the Canberra Raiders at the end of the season. The Raiders confirmed that news this week. It's been rumoured for a long time now. It looks like it's been a long-running dispute over money between the club and John Bateman's management. There's been, some fairly harsh opinions of the whole thing circulating in Australia. What's your take on this, Tom? How do you think that the whole scenario has been handled from both sides?
It's another one of those stories that's rattled on for months, isn't it? And it's really helped tide us over during suspension to see one of the star England international players involved in such a big news story. You're right, the story's been confirmed. He's leaving Canberra. He'll play for a different club next year. And there's been a lot of voices in the conversation, not least of all Bateman's agent, Isaac Moses, who's copped some stick this week from Ricky Stewart for his role, or his alleged role in Bateman's departure. So Stewart's accusation is that Bateman has intentionally been unsettled, and he's made sort of wider allusions towards the role of agents in the NRL in terms of their disruption of squads. Moses has responded, saying he only acts in the interest of players, and he's laid the blame at Canberra's door in the sense that he's said they don't have the money to keep him. So it's very much a case of who you believe. In the middle of all of this, of course, is the player himself, John Bateman, who's currently sidelined through injury. And throughout the whole saga, up until fairly recently, has been very insistent that he's remaining with Canberra. Very critical of the journalists that have reported that he's leaving, and very steadfast in his commitment to returning to the field and pulling on that green jersey again. We now know that that's not likely to happen and that we will see him in a different shirt next year. Which shirt that will be, we don't know. We know that Wigan, or we believe that Wigan are interested, and we understand there's even a deal on the table from Wigan for Bateman. The Warriors, of course, with a track record of bringing players back to the club, Thomas Luluai being one recent example. But as we know, Bateman, a fantastic player for Bradford, a fantastic player for Wigan, and he's taken that form with him and made a huge impact in the NRL. Will not be short of offers down under, so it will be interesting to see the decision he takes next.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I said, the offers on the table will be coming thick and fast. The reigning Dally M second rower of the year, it'll command a high price tag, as has been one of the reasons touted for the reason for all of this breaking down at Canberra. So it'll be interesting to see which clubs are potentially, depending on which way you look at it, willing to step up and pay that big pay packet for John Bateman. It's interesting you say about the growing narrative in Australia about the negativity about how the player managers work. You often have a single player manager that manages a large number of players at individual clubs, and therefore there is growing speculation and thought process that they perhaps have too much power and too much influence on the playing rosters, like you say. And I've actually heard mentions in the Australian press this week that the NRL are looking at a potential new structure for player management to possibly centralise it to prevent individuals from having too much influence. So we'll see whether that comes to fruition in the coming months. But very interesting point. We'll look on and see where John Bateman ends up in 2021. But next up, moving on to another story that's ever developing, the Euro 13 competition, set to kick off next year. We obviously did an in-depth Q&A with the organisers of that tournament to answer a few burning questions for the tournament next year that's going to be happening. 16 clubs going to be taking part across Europe. We've now had 14 clubs revealed at the moment, with 4 new ones revealed this week, with clubs spanning as far as Spain all the way across to Turkey. So, Tom, from your perspective, from a fan's perspective, and for the expansion of the game, how potentially exciting could this tournament be? There's some real variety there.
There is some real variety there, and I think it's quite telling in the selection of the latest 4 clubs and one of the other recent clubs. So the latest 4 to be announced are Edinburgh, Copenhagen, Leone Venetti, and Chisinau Scorpions. Leone Venetti of Italy and Chisinau Scorpions of Moldova. But to me, 2 of the interesting names announced recently are the Edinburgh Eagles and the Ronda Outlaws. And I think their inclusion starts to reveal a little bit more about how we'll see the competition work. And, I'll have to admit, I was, unsure of what the format would be before we spoke to Dean in our Q&A. But it's emerging that we very much need to look at this competition as well as it's something that's going to tag on to the existing domestic competition. I think there were some perceptions when the competition was first announced and they started making some noise on Twitter that this was intended as something that was going to take clubs away from their competitions, or that was intended to disrupt existing competitions. But you see a name like Edinburgh, and from a Scottish perspective, they are quite well established. And the same with Ronda Outlaws in Wales. They're playing domestic competitions in Wales, and it really starts to reveal the essence, if you like, of the competition, that there are established grassroots clubs that compete in their own domestic competitions that are entering the Euro 13's tournament. And I think it's great to see that. We're now at a position, as you say, where we have 14 clubs revealed, 2 to go, a huge breadth. Still, I'm sure from many perspectives, some questions to answer, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how this project develops. And there's nothing really to lose from a rugby league perspective. As I say, these clubs are still involved in their domestic competitions. If the competition's a success, it gives them the opportunity to play against opponents from across Europe and to increase the number of fixtures for some of the outpost teams. So I can't really see any issues at the moment, but as I say, time will tell.
Yeah, just adding to that point of what you said about the game not really having anything to lose, we sort of try and fly the flag of expanding the game and really sort of trying to champion growing the game in sectors where it's not particularly popular. And this tournament certainly has the sort of potential to do that. And we spoke to the backers last week, and they said that they've got plans in place and a lot of their own financial backing. So it's not going to impact these clubs financially. And like you say, they're going to get additional fixtures and additional exposure, not just in their own backyard, but across Europe and playing in countries that may well have never been subject to rugby league before. So it's certainly exciting. But like you say, there's a lot of I's to dot, T's to cross before we get to the kickoff stage. It'll be very interesting to see how it all unfolds. Now, the rumour mill in rugby league is never ending, as I'm sure it is in all sports. And this week, 4020 News reporter John Davidson broke a story suggesting that Leeds Rhinos star Liam Sutcliffe could be set to head to the jungle, joining Castleford next year. This one's come out of a little bit of left field, but these rumours and gossips often do. Tom, what were your initial thoughts on this one? Were you surprised to see Castleford might be interested in Sutcliffe? And if this move were to go ahead, what do you think he could potentially bring to Castleford?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that it is something that's come out of left field. Liam Sutcliffe for many years seemed to be a big part of the furniture at Leeds in terms of a young project, a young player coming through who was seen as being one of the men who'd help fill the boots of the class of 2005, 6, 7, 8, etc., who retired. Your Sinfields, your Jamie Jones Buchanans, your Peacocks, etc. Those lads have all moved on and retired, and Sutcliffe was definitely earmarked alongside the likes of Stevie Ward as being one of the players to step up into those senior roles. And in fairness to the lad, he's been a great player for Leeds. He's had his share of injury problems. We know he's undergone surgery during the suspension, so he has had his disruption in that sense. But he's a player that offers a lot of utility value. He's shown good leadership for a young player. And to me, he seems like the sort of player that Daryl Powell would love to work with in terms of getting him back on track, helping him unlock that potential. It remains to be seen what happens. I think there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. We have the story that Castleford have expressed an interest and there may be the opportunity for the switch to happen, but conversations, I'm sure, are still to happen. There could be changes of heart. There could be plans changing all the time. At the moment, with the way player recruitment's going to be shaped, I think clubs rather may look to retain players rather than move them on. So it'll be interesting to see how things develop.
Yeah, it certainly will. It's interesting what you say about Sutcliffe. By now, it feels like he's been around for a long time. He's still relatively young. He's been at Leeds for a lot of years. He's probably part of the fabric at Headingley, really, and probably copped a lot of criticism during his career. Probably because, like you say, of that utility value is often really valuable to a side, but sometimes can be detrimental to the progress of a player. Having to play different positions. He's played in major games in the second row, in the centres, and even in the halves at times, and it can be quite difficult for players to sort of focus if they're changing roles every week. But often players have to play the role that is best for the team, and Liam Sutcliffe is sort of that sort of player for Leeds. Like you say, I agree completely with what you're saying about Daryl Powell. He has the habit of getting the very best out of players, and players that go to Castleford that have possibly been seen as players who've stagnated or not progressed how they should end up going to the next level. So it'll be very, very intriguing to see whether that move happens, and if it does, how Liam Sutcliffe could travel at Castleford. We'll finish off the major news stories with a story that broke this morning. Israel Folau has signed a new one-year deal to keep him at Catalans till the end of the 2021 season, despite heavy interest from NRL clubs. This is obviously huge news for the Dragons, Tom. Are you at all surprised to see him commit his future to Catalans? And, with his actions here and the circumstances of him joining the club, does this show a degree of appreciation and loyalty to the Catalans?
I was surprised to see the news announced so soon. We got the press release through from Yannick Ray this morning, advising of the new deal. And yeah, I was surprised to see him locked down so early, but I think that's a reflection of him being an in-demand player. Bernard Gouache, the Catalans chairman, quoted in the press release as saying that Israel's a player who's in demand, and alluding, there's other sources alluding to interest from the NRL as well. Look, from a playing perspective, I think Israel Folau is undoubtedly a brilliant asset to any team. He's an outstanding athletic centre that could, if we're being realistic, from a rugby league perspective, would walk into any Super League team and probably the majority of NRL teams, even at, I think he's past the 30 years old mark, but still, huge amounts to offer. Obviously, the elephant in the room is the controversial circumstances under which he signed. That, again, Gouache in the press release makes reference to the fact that the media storm has passed, and certainly the spotlight on him has dimmed. Now he's made the debut, and obviously with the sport being suspended, the spotlight's faded on everybody. But the fact remains, and the Instagram post remains. His views on homosexuality caused a lot of controversy. He's never apologised for those comments. He hasn't deleted the post. And you look at the climate that we operate in at the moment, and you look at the climate that sports operating at the moment with the Black Lives Matter movement, organisations like Rugby League World Cup 2021 making huge commitments to diversity in terms of how they're positioning the tournament, positioning the branding, and the engagement the sport has with the LGBT community. You look at Keighley Cougars last year holding their Pride Day. And if I'm being honest, it still doesn't sit comfortably that we have a player in the sport who holds those views. And I think, as I say, from an athletic perspective, from a playing perspective, outstanding, a brilliant player and an asset to any club. But I still find it difficult to stomach the fact that we have somebody like Israel as one of the stars of our competition.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. It's one of those situations and the controversies that's never really had a conclusion. It's always difficult with players sort of preaching their religious beliefs. But like you say, that the comments that he made a long time ago that saw him originally sacked from his contract in rugby union in Australia have still never really gone away, and he's never really shown any remorse for those comments. So, but it is interesting, like you say, from a business point of view. I think the business juggernaut for clubs indefinitely rolls on, and it seems to have sort of not gone on the back burner, but the controversy has faded away, like you say, since he took to the field and he started to put together some handy performances for Catalans. And I wasn't at all surprised to suddenly see NRL clubs, show interest. And if I'm being honest, I was probably expecting him to sign a deal in the NRL. I know that they have made their stance on the situation clear before he signed for Catalans, but like you say, he is a quality player at the end of the day, and to some extent, and I'm not questioning the values of any of these clubs that may have shown interest in him, but at the end of the day, he is a quality player that would be an asset to anybody's squad. So, from an on-field perspective, it's obviously great news for Catalan, but there is obviously that little sort of black mark that's will continue to hover around his profile while he's in Super League. So it'll be, again, interesting to see what happens there. But he will be in Perpignan until at least the end of the 2021 season. So there you have it. That's our take on the major news stories across rugby league circles this week. But before we go, I'd just like to congratulate former Catalans coach Laurent Fresinu on his appointment as the first head coach of the Ottawa Aces. This is a story that was originally broke by John Davidson again back in March and was confirmed by the League One club in waiting yesterday. He hasn't been seen in the coaching circle since leaving the Dragons in 2017, but he will get the exciting opportunity to resurrect his career across the Atlantic at one of the sport's newest clubs, and as they get ready to make their League One debut in 2021. So the very best of luck to him. But that's it for this week's 4020 Newscast. Thank you very much for listening. You can check out all the details of the topics we've covered on our website. Please let us know your views on Facebook and our Twitter channel. And feel free to join the conversation in our 4020 fans Facebook group. And remember, for all the latest news and magazine content daily, visit 4020.news.
4020 Newscast.